Aloha Kagiaka. This is Ube Urban, and this is how I create.
Welcome to This Is How We Create, a show that digs deeper into the creative life of contemporary artists of color. Discover what feeds their creativity and how they found or are finding their artistic voice. Through these intimate and candid conversations, you'll gain insights into the lives of creative professionals of color that are hard to find anywhere else. Hi, welcome back to This Is How We Create. My name is Martine Severin, your host. For today's episode, we're going to be in conversation with Ube Urban, a digital design innovator whose work directly impacts how we all interact with technology every day. So if you've ever rage click through a frustrating website or abandoned a glitchy checkout process, then you know why someone like Ube matters. As a leader in customer experience, he's the person fighting to make digital spaces work intuitively for actual human beings instead of robots. But Ube's approach to design goes deeper than just aesthetics or functionality. Born in Hawaii with Black, Japanese, and Hawaiian roots and Filipino roots, Ube brings a perspective to our conversation as well as perspective to his work that is really shaped by cultural displacement and code switching between worlds. Does this resonate with you? Because certainly it does with me as somebody who came from an island and has had to navigate a different space in terms of living in the US. Back to Ube. When he left Hawaii for the mainland, he experienced firsthand how identity gets flattened and sometimes commodified. But his insights he gained from this experience, he now channels into creating more authentic digital spaces for us all to enjoy. In our conversation today, Ube breaks down his framework for helping other creatives develop their authentic personal brand while rejecting the pressures to fit into predetermined boxes. Ube talks openly about the challenges that he faces while navigating a creative industry as a person of color and offers great practical wisdom for you if you're looking to maintain your cultural integrity in professional settings. I really appreciated this conversation because this is this is something that I deal with on an everyday basis. If you're an aspiring designer, interested in how you can better integrate your cultural background and use that to shape your creative work, or you're just curious about the invisible architecture that guides our online experiences, then Ube's perspective will transform how you think about design in your everyday life. That's it for now. Please enjoy this conversation with Ube Urban. Ube, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Ube, I would love for us to start the show by you introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the most important about me is that I am Pacific Islander, born in Hawaii. I am Japanese, Black, Native American, and Filipino. My identity and how I grew up is very Pacific Islander. I would say a mixture between Hawaiian traditions, Japanese, and Filipino prior to coming to the mainland. As of today, I represent for everyone. And then I could go into kind of my job, but that's more of my background.
So, Ube, we're going to talk a little bit more deeply about you and your background and growing up in Hawaii. Could you tell us about your job, your profession? What are you currently doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. I am head of customer experience. Typically, this means a lot of different hats, anywhere from building teams to building cultural identity within a company and also market segmentations within the digital landscape. That sounds like a lot of business words, but basically having empathetic conversations and bringing the identity through a digital lens. So, for example, a client will come to me and not necessarily doing a whole refresh of their website. But when they come to our team, we try to figure out the overall flows of how people navigate through their various channels. This could be digital, this could be phygital, which is physical and digital environments. But the fact is that we track that and we create meaningful experiences and very intentional. So that intentionality going forward is not random. For example, you don't go from buying an iPad in store and then you go to the digital experience, aka a website, and we forget your name or we forget your identity or even the item that you had in your cart. So you don't want to serve up somebody that is buying one specific item and trying to have them buy a Mac or what have you. This is also called bad experiences, and people know what bad experiences are through a lot of products they interact with. So ideally, I like to communicate it as like myself and my team are ninjas in the background. If we're doing a great job, you're not going to know we're there.
Oh, that's a good one. The reason why I'm saying this is
Yeah.
before I came down here to talk to you, my little guy got him off to school, and I'm tidying up the kitchen before coming down to the studio, which is in my home. And I'm looking down at the floor and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much dust
Yeah. It's a losing
everywhere.
battle with the little one.
And two dogs.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that too.
Right? That
Same,
too.
same.
Um, And I'm thinking, gosh, oh, this is the invisible work, right? Because when the house is clean, nice, nobody really notices, but everyone notices when everything is a mess. When everything is going well, people don't notice.
Right.
And that is the invisible work so many people do, and you do, right? So that the customer experience is really just seamless.
Right, exactly. And you should just essentially just level set. We have a very high caliber of like delivering these amazing or meaningful experiences to an array of clientele, but taking it back to the personal approach, like your home, what is your basal level? You know, and if you do have guests, when they walk into your house, this is like my grandmother. She always said, you always have to have a clean house, even if nobody's visiting. You want to be 5 minutes away to cleaning up and just getting everything situated. So like presentation was always ingrained in me, even though I didn't know a clue of why she wanted me to clean up that instant. Are we expecting anybody? You know, do we have family coming over? And it's like, no, that doesn't matter. You should just always have this certain approach on keeping your environment clean, tidy, organized going forward. Of course, in retrospect, I get that now, but like this is kind of how I structure my life. Like everything is, I wouldn't necessarily say in a component or what have you, but I try to keep everything just on that basal level of like, okay, if somebody comes in, it's always welcoming. It's always ready for you. And we tend to have this like comment when people come in, oh my gosh, wow, your house is so clean. What do you mean my house is so clean? It's always like this. This is just how we like to occupy our environment. And I think that's very valuable because like that internal way of keeping your caliber resonates with like the people you interact with. How you sell yourself just creates like this sense of like dapperism. And people think dapperism or tailor made is the armor that you wear, a tailored suit, a tailored whatever. But when it comes down to it, it's a lifestyle. It's how you carry yourself. And the same with my disconnection when I'm away from one of my spaces, whether it be a comfortable environment, a car, a house. When you see Ube Urban by himself, you see that what I wear, how I carry myself is very intentional. And you can see that level of pedigree. And this is just the frame of mind. This is not just what I'm wearing, because yes, I do like to dress well. But at the same time, I could be wearing jeans and a t-shirt. I could be at the swimming pool. But the person that you interact with is always going to be consistent, no matter if I'm in a social environment or even in a professional one. And then that brand consistency should have that aperture across the world. And this is something that I work very hard with. So people that I interact with, whether it's you, one of my colleagues, a friend, they're all speaking that same voice of, yes, Ube Urban. Have you met him? He's quite quirky. He's charismatic. But that's consistent, and I don't have to sell that. And I'm very humbled by that. But at the same time, it's just an ongoing social experiment where it's, wow, it's great to have colleagues or friends or acquaintances all have that same voice.
Uwe, I'd love to talk a little bit about the basal level. And I think for most of us, it's set in childhood. I would love for you to share with us your early childhood memories about growing up in Hawaii and how you had any early exposures to art or how art might have influenced your creative journey.
That is a great question. Quite a few insights. So that's going to touch on many aspects of me growing up. When it comes to exposure, I clearly did not have any of that within my family. It was pretty slim pickings on what you became as a professional. And those around me were either blue collar or they worked in the hotels and the hospitality district of Honolulu. But when it came to artistic ability or kind of finding their niche, that wasn't something that was necessarily praised. And I don't want to say that in a bad way. It wasn't like I was deprived of like really figuring out who I was. I think the writing was on the wall from how I essentially organized my Legos. It was based on size, color, and everything had its own jar and placement, that component system. And you'll see it come up over and over again of just keeping an organized life. And this organization kind of kept me going forward. It was something that I could essentially go back to. I attained that. But my environment was honestly, it was kind of chaotic. My family was kind of hoarder. They kept a lot of stuff around. It wasn't OCD at all. My environment that you see right now in the garage, like this is overkill, but this is me. This is my identity. But the culture was pretty much a melting pot. You had people from Samoa, Tonga, Guam. You have the Pacific Islands. You had a lot of people from Japan. And then you have the kind of military upbringing. So it was great to have that melting pot. It really made me just be proud of not only my identity, but also my culture and where I grew up from. To go back, I didn't realize I was at a tourist destination. I didn't realize that I was at a place where people vacation to. So that was a huge disconnect. And fast forwarding up to today, this is one of my friction points of how I introduce myself. The last thing I want to introduce is where I'm from, because this brings up just very simplistic minds and just these endeavors of what people assume the islands are about. And I'm sure you can relate as well. Let me, spoiler, here's my top 3 questions. Do you like pineapple on your pizza? Do you surf? Do you like the water? Why did you leave such a beautiful place? I don't know. How do you answer that? And to give a little bit more context and background, this usually happens when I'm at a grocery store, maybe getting a cappuccino at a coffee shop. So it's not the right place and time, but people are always going to be curious. And being ethnically androgynous, and this is a new thing, being in that androgyny, whether it's masculinity or even culturally, this is something that I experienced in the mainland. But when I was growing up, I didn't really have to deal with that. It just wasn't an issue. So it's interesting to have these like new topics that I'm facing through adolescence into an adult and to a seasoned vet professional. But to go back into my childhood, it was really great just to embrace and really be proud of who I was. This is something that I wish I could kind of take from the past and reintroduce that in today, because that is a huge struggle of just really trying to have that identity stay with you and be proud of it, especially in a lot of the environments that I occupy. I tend to be not only person of color, but only person of my makeup. So there's a lot of introduction. There's a lot of trying to educate others when I'm clearly not hired to do that, but it just comes, it's part of the collateral.
Well, I'm just curious if you could introduce that mix of emotion, of pride, of sureness that you had when you were younger to your life today. How do you think it would affect you?
I probably wouldn't be in corporate identity. This trending word of being authentic, that's always been very challenging to me and how I define it. When it comes down to it, it's not a real thing. It's just a superficial way of saying, like, just be yourself. That you can't be yourself. Because if I'm gonna be myself, I'm gonna speak in different dialect. Like, I'm probably not gonna be in my full dapper ensemble or my armor. And yeah, there's just so many cultural disconnects. When people say that, they say it very like que sera. And the reason that there's a huge disconnect is that a lot of people just don't have the time, they don't care, or they just don't have the bandwidth to like really understand other people around them. And for me, this is something that I try to reject. I try to embrace people that are around me. I really want to figure out their journey. I want to know what they identify with. And this is usually probably one of my top 10 questions when I'm having a conversation with somebody is, okay, great. This is your journey. This is where you came from. A lot of people like to lead with their profession, their title. It's very important to them to really have that classification of, hey, I stand here. But when you interact with myself, I try to exude a lot of what I grew up with, and really embrace that today. This is my identity. Whether you like it or not, it's very important to me. And it's something that I need to sell going forward.
You and I had a long conversation, a prep conversation before this podcast. And I think I noticed this the last time we chatted because you talked about having to perform and about having to wear an armor. And I wonder who you are, Ube, when no one is looking, when the doors are shut and it's just you at home with the family, or even it's just you in your garage as you are now when no one is looking. Who are you?
Well, I still have my tsunami hairstyle. That always needs to be on point. But yeah, I mean, I really love to embrace my family. I'm somebody that like will take you in no matter what. I'm a very wholesome, just genuine person. But I'm also faced with this disconnection of identity and culture. Being in Atlanta, it's very distant from what I know and what I've grew up with. Even in San Francisco or kind of the mainland, that just it was hard. So that question that you're proposing, in retrospect, I can answer it now. But that journey going to a new level or phase and stage in my life it was quite a reality check on so many different ways. And that's where kind of my pride was being tested. My identity was being portrayed in a way where I just wasn't really happy with myself. And the reason for that is that other people just like have these specific views or check boxes of kind of your political identity. This is what you look like. That's what you are. And I just wasn't used to that. When you're in Hawaii, you're just like, oh my gosh, this is who I am. This is who we all are. And that's it. I don't have to prove to you my existence or my family or our pride. We all share that. We all have that sense of community. So yeah, when I came to the mainland, it was essentially I was this person kind of holding this gem, and it was very polished, it was shiny, I was very proud. And then it was just nicked. And then I had like battle wounds over time, and my shiny diamond turned into this rough rock. And then that rough rock, I wanted to just basically push it down into my stomach and cover it with mounds of mountains and whatnot and create a new identity that enabled me to navigate, that gave me the dialect, that gave me also the courage of interacting with a new culture and what that new currency may be. So a lot of it was kind of pressing and suppressing who I was, but also flourishing into a new identity of who I will be and will become. But in retrospect, yes, I'm very proud of where I am today, and I'm able to bring out that diamond again out of the rough. But that journey in between was it's hard to really communicate to somebody of what pride is. You're representing your family. You're representing a culture. You're representing land. And then there's just huge disconnect, even that goes today, of stand up for Hawaiian lands. And this reason is because our culture, my people, are being displaced because we can't even afford to stay where our culture is. And that's just, it's hard to communicate that to somebody. It's not just, oh, what if your neighborhood got gentrified and, you know, you got $1 million homes? What if multi-million-dollar homes kicked you out of the United States? How would that feel? You're not even going to know how that feels. It's so deep where you're just, what is home? How do I create a new home? And the only sense of home is your culture, is your identity. So how am I going to package that and sell that as a commodity where people can identify, where people are very different than me will still have that association of, oh man, being Hawaiian is deeper than surfing, eating pineapples on your pizza. You know, it's more of we're displaced, we're being crumpled down, we're another tourist destination. And that's fine and dandy. It's great upward mobility, but at the same time, it brings a lot of the wrong intentions going forward.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yeah,
Well, I have
right?
no words. It's awful. I mean, when you're pushed out of your home and you have to settle elsewhere,
Yeah,
and when the island is so much part, I'm assuming that the island is so much part of the culture,
absolutely. It is. It is.
and then you leave the island.
Yeah, right. You leave it, and then you have this the sense of, are you going to go back home and rebuild? Or are you going to continue forward? But if you continue forward in your trajectory, you'll have more displacement within your own family because it's, hey, you have to pay true to your pride, who you are. But at the same time, you're kind of going in this new sector that's very foreign to all of us. What are you doing? And it's like, wait, hold on. I'm still representing. But even though I'm in a new phase and stage, even that's very distant from what my family would ever know. I mean, even till this day, my family doesn't know what I do. Yeah, I'm like, hey, have you heard of graphic design, user experience, user interface? And then I try to like teach them, and they don't really get it, but they understand stuff that they use or products they use. And I can say, hey, I designed that. You know, I did that, or myself and my team did. They're like, oh, wow, that's amazing. So, like,
The reality is, so many of us don't even know what our friends and family do, right?
yeah, right.
Yeah, my partner, once he starts talking about what he does, I just hear blah, 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 blah. I mean, I'm joking. He works in a field that's just really complicated. And so when I try to explain it, it's like, well, Ube, I just want to connect Hawaii to how you ended up in Atlanta. So we know that you left Hawaii and then you spent some time in California
A
and
lot of
you
time.
attended
Yeah.
Berkeley.
Hmm.
How did you end up in Atlanta?
Yeah, that's quite a kind of random journey. The Atlanta part. It is and it isn't. When I kicked off my professional and also my academia career or background, that's where pretty much my life flourished. And this was when I was 14, 15. So this was a very kind of important milestone for myself. And it's kind of weird the amount of time that I spent in the Bay Area or San Francisco proper, and having that new association be a huge impact on me being a native to a new place. So, in retrospect, we talk about growing up in Hawaii and having that association. That association was at a time where I was a sponge. I was a kid. I was nowhere near my adolescent. I wasn't an adult. So, like, when I look back, those key moments, those moments of joy or things that I really can take away are from San Francisco. That's I wouldn't say my home, but it's a place that I represent maybe even a little bit more than being from Hawaii. But it just has a different flavor. It has like different stages. I went to California College of Arts and Crafts for industrial design. Industrial design is pretty much anything you interact with that isn't designed by an engineer or architect. So cameras, your phone, mics, speakers, pretty much everything under the sun. And that's where I really like kind of segued into this UCI or user interface or human ergonomics. That's what it was called before there was a UX or UI. I don't really want to date myself because my public age is 27, everybody.
I think all of us have that age where we feel a certain way, like you feel that your youth is that specific age. For you, it's 27.
I think how I carry myself intellectually, it's definitely an older soul. But I don't know. I just feel like I still kind of have that look and feel. My other half may beg to differ, but I still feel very young. Let's just say when I interact with people that are my age, they typically speak down and they're like, "Oh yeah, when you become my age," I'm like, "What do you mean? I'm older than you. What are you talking about?" So it's always awkward conversation when they figure that out. But at the same time, I don't want to admit my age.
So, Ube, you are a teacher through and through. And when we chatted, you talked about a framework that you use to help others identify their vision and stay true to themselves. Can you tell us a little bit about that framework?
Yeah, absolutely. This framework, FYI, is very bespoke to the individual, and everybody has their own kind of trials and tribulations that they've gone through. And yeah, a lot of times people are trying to find a new career, they're switching from their existing state. Most of the people I coach or mentor, they like hearing my story because it's obvious, a person of color that's navigated in kind of higher states of the organization. And at that level, it tends to be a little, let's just say, lonely. There isn't a whole lot of people to interact with, which is okay. I don't mind trailblazing, but that means you have to develop a very thick skin. So with that, I always have a lot of people coming to me, not only for how I storytell, but just that authenticity of just bringing them into my journey and also having that dialogue with the person that I'm interacting with. A lot of times people just want to feel appreciated. And the thing is, when I interact with people, I listen, I hear, and then I create a journey. And then I have them map their own. What brought you here from wherever you want to start? You can start from last week. You can start from right now. You can start from when you're a child. But based on your journey, what brought you here to speak with me at this given moment? And then from there, I'm like, why do you want to continue this conversation? Because what I promote, what I like to share, it's very bespoke. Like I don't rinse and repeat. I don't create black and white framework. I refuse to do it. But I think a lot develops a character and developing a sense of self that people can take and grow with the way they want to. And that's very important to me. I don't want to have complete ownership of where you go in life. I don't want to dictate your next job. I try to build people on an individualistic level. I'm not building you up to become a director or a VP or even a partner. That is not my end goal. My end goal is to create a better person, somebody that not only wants to invest in themselves, but invest in those around them. So a lot of what I do is basically trying to reinvest in people that are trying to have that upward mobility, and this is not just kids of color or different class levels or what have you. It's just anybody that is willing to spend that time to have that growth. And I'm not saying I try to have that specific like window of, oh, you need to meet this criteria before you speak with me. Absolutely not. Because I like to think of myself as representing the gray area based on kind of my androgyny of my background and profession, being a jack of all trades, my kind of sexual orientation from being an islander to an American, and how they define male female. I thought that was very interesting. And also the like my androgyny of my cultures, and how that portrays and how people interact with that. It's a lucrative approach that people not only want to hear more, but they also try to find within themselves, how am I different? What makes me me? What is my journey? And from that, we cater and create that niche on becoming your person, your sense of self. That's how you create your own brand. You don't create your own brand of having a specific portfolio and doing work that nobody's doing. Guess what? It's been done. Let's get over that. But how can you control something that a corporation, an agency, or a company cannot control? That is the hardest part. And something that is not augmented by the people you're around, the different stages and phases of your life. You have that identity. You can make it better. You can augment it, or maybe it's just not for you. But what I also disclose is that many people in a whole lifetime never have their own sense of self, their identity, their own brand. And this is what I'm trying to promote. You can walk into a room, you don't have to say a word, and people will remember you. That's where a lot of people want to be.
Ube, can you give us some more examples of questions that you have people ask themselves so that they can get greater clarity as to who they are?
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, again, it would be the dialogue going back and forth. When I do have any type of interviews or questionnaires, there isn't a set bracket of, hey, what's your name? Or like, do you remember that childhood moment? It's more of what has brought you here? And these are like very meaningful questions. They're very qualitative, and sometimes I'll have more measurable results of, okay, if you want to have more of a presence or you want to work on kind of your social identity, guess what? I can do that. I wouldn't say that's my bread and butter, but that is the new demographic of more of the younger kids, the Gen Zs, the alphas, and you have to cater towards that. But when it comes down to it, it's just more of pivotal ways of establishing where you want to be, and usually people come to me based on that dialogue, that conversation, and it isn't a set framework again.
I guess, generally speaking, are there some characteristics that the people who are really good at sitting down and working through all of those questions and being able to have that conversation with you, do those people have a specific characteristics, at least the ones that can come out the other end and have more clarity?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Essentially, have to take it serious. You have to have that open dialogue. I'm not saying we need to have like a checkpoint bi-weekly or every week, but it just comes to having that sense of communication. Are you really serious about having this engagement? Because I don't have time to waste, and neither do you. Maybe I'm not the right person, and I know I'm not the smartest person in the room, but I also try to shape and craft this like existing fabric, this net that exists in our network. And when people do or are serious about going forward, start to present them to other professionals that I may know in the woodwork, in the horizon. Hey, you've gotten this from me, but based on our conversation, your journey, and how you structured your life in retrospect, I think you should also speak to this individual as well. And it's always great to just have a better perspective, something that's greater than just one voice, because I think one voice is kind of hitting the ceiling. But if you get that sense of journey, not just from me, but other individuals and other crafts and what have you, I think that also just creates, I would say, like a meaningful perspective from the mentee. They're not like, oh, this guy is all about himself. It's his way or the highway. Absolutely not. I'm very confident in what I think. I do know a whole lot of KPIs and how to move organizations in the north direction. but it's just not my way, and I don't think that's healthy to have that perspective. And I wish I had somebody not like myself, but also somebody to give me that catapult of here's me, here's also my friends, and why don't you choose your journey on who you gravitate to most? Because I'm not going to inflict on I am the best person for you. I always put out, let's get to know each other. Do you even like me? Do I even like you? Do we have a healthy conversation? Do you like how I set the stages and phases going forward? So typically, I know you want to go into kind of more of the ones and zeros, but I start with getting to know each other. And then I also present my craft and kind of my journey and story. And then when it comes down to it, I showcase, hey, this is what my professional journey looks like. And do it through storytelling, and people gravitate towards that. And then I pass the mic. Your turn. I don't have it fully established. I can't really answer that. Okay, cool. I'll jot that down. That's something to work on. All right. What is your personal craft? How do you sell yourself? Do you have that brand consistency or that person consistency amongst your various environments that you occupy? No, I don't. This is how I am with my family. This is how I am in my social groups. This is how I am professionally. Do you want to have one individual going forward? I would like that, but I don't have that. But write in my notebook. That's another thing that needs to be unlocked and achieved. So, like, as you have that conversation and that dialogue, you start to figure out more about that person. And in return, I figure out more about myself because I expect the person that I'm mentoring or coaching to also bring out areas and interest and curiosities and kind of really focus on my friction points or my pain points that I may not share. Hence, going more into the deep dive of being personal. I'm personable, but when somebody goes into me personally and I'm like, ooh, you want the rich details? Okay, this is something that I have to also work on and also share going back. So I think it's definitely like reciprocal. It's a great energy that goes back and forth, and that's pretty much how it's defined. So it may sound like it's a little bit of the quantitative, qualitative, and seems like kind of a mixture of organic play on how the mapping or the journey gets laid out. But it's also, again, this is best spoke to an individual. So it's very hard to essentially augment who somebody is on somebody else's kind of chart. And a lot of times it's not linear. And that's the best part about being a human being, right?
That is indeed the best part. And I think most of the conversation we're having today is about that in particular, in that we are all individuals. And that's great because, in your case, you're able to create a program and cater it to the specific individual. But then when you think about the issues that you're talking about in terms of feeling disconnected when you came over to the mainland, and the expectations here on the mainland is that we need to categorize you so that on the whole, upon seeing you, we understand who you are and we understand what we're going to expect, and we're going to make sure that you understand that you need to behave in a specific way. And that framework doesn't work for everyone.
It doesn't.
It
Yeah,
doesn't.
no.
It doesn't, because at the core, there are some people who just cannot assimilate and cannot. I guess there are some people who resist. I just keep thinking about how, in
So
some
many
ways,
people.
culturally, it's like I don't know if you watch Star Trek. It's
You mean
like,
the old school
do you
one?
watch Star
Yes.
Trek? Well, yeah. Well, you remember the Borg?
Yes.
So coming over, it was like you got on the Borg ship,
Yeah.
you had to assimilate, and individuality is kind of wiped off, and you can be an individual as long as you select from what's on the shelf.
Right.
These are the acceptable individuals,
Exactly.
and if you are going to be authentic, this is the way, follow this recipe to be authentic.
Right. No, exactly. And this just popped up in my head when you brought that up. Like, I do teach a lot of about intersectionality. So it's like it's a lot of different moments in your life, emotion, and how you cater going forward. So a lot of that fabric is something that's very important to everybody's kind of individuality going forward. And especially in American culture, just everything's just is so linear and has its own kind of compartment, and guess what? Those paths never diverge. And this is something where I'm like, what? Let's just take all of this, let's twist it, and let's see what we get out of it. And usually it's a better resort, because it means you have to spend less energy trying to be the superficial person that you aren't in different areas. Let's scrap that all down. Let's rip down the curtain. Why can't you just be you all the time? Whether people are like you or not. There's a lot of people that just don't like me, unfortunately. Even though I'm very personable, they're just, I don't know, this Ube cat that can't be the actual person. Guess what? It is. And this is me. And this is what I'm proud. And a lot of the topics may be discouraging. Being proud of your identity, knowing who you are, knowing your purpose. Really, a lot of people shy away from that. They're just like, oh, I thought you were a cog. I thought you were like this kind of bougie individual that was in these kind of facades. No, I'm not. And this disconnect is something that I always face, even till this day, of people see the facade. They reinterpret dapperism for what you wear. They think that's a garment, and that's it. But I have to overextend and say, this is a lifestyle. This isn't necessarily what you put on. And it shouldn't matter on what your armor is. It's just your presentation, your interaction, you being empathetic. Because you can sell yourself and just have a careless soul and be a narcissistic asshole going forward. And you have a great story, but you don't care about those people around you. You don't care about individuals. And you can succeed. But also, there's that level of the bell curve. Well, it'll taper down. You'll burn those bridges. People will find it old because you're basically just selling the same story. How do you perform in a way where it's lucrative? You have a niche. It feels authentic or personable, but you can't necessarily be your 100% self, And I think this is what we're trying to uncover through this conversation of what is Ube's identity behind a curtain. It's pretty consistent, but at the same time, I'm willing to admit a lot of my kind of friction and pain points of, yes, I have a compelling story. Yes, people are drawn to it. But there are also those in a specific segment that aren't really drawn to it, that are threatened by it. Having that sense of security as a person, having your own niche, not being a cog, you're not going to be in mainstream society. Like, let's be clear. That's a spoiler alert. But maybe depending on your platform, but when you're not at celebrity status or you don't have this kind of visual component of what people want to see and what that facade is and what you represent as a wholesome person, or just knowing that you're just a basic person. This is something that I always resonate. People are like, oh my gosh. If they meet me and they know my work and they follow and whatnot, I'm not into all that. The likes and all, like my social media, you probably did your research. It's not that it's not that high. I don't really push it. When it comes down to it, I don't care about any of that. And maybe it's because of how we grew up. It just wasn't big. You had maybe MySpace later down. It was more informative. You're doing more informational gathering than anything else. You have the Encyclopedia Britannica that came on 2 discs in a big box. All software came in huge boxes, even games. And you would get a compact disc. For those young ones, a CD. This rainbow cylindrical shape with the hole in the middle that gave a lot of information. So maybe it's that disconnection, or maybe it's that journey into, this new kind of manufactured way of having likes and more visibility, becoming more important. And more attainable to different segments, not just in corporate identity. We talk about the reach all the time and what the pathways are, but now you can be an individual creator and kind of have that sense of what your journey is, what the stories are, and presenting this kind of bespoke offering of what the identity or what your identity of what you want to sell is going to be, which is hard because you have to play by the script. You can't go off script, because going off script, that intersectionality experience doesn't sell. And you see it with a lot of creators. Some of my acquaintances, they're kind of stuck in this singular pathway, and they're like, oh, I want to do this, but it means I would have to break my channel. I'd have to go in different areas of my whole digital experience. And I'm like, that's okay. Are you okay with it? If you're not, just stick with the bread and butter, but you are tired of it and it's taxing on kind of your sense of self, you can change if you're willing to, right? I'm not going to twist your arm. That's a decision that you have to make. And yeah, and I think it is also humbling that people come to me for these conversations of what should I do? You've done your own company. You've also had kind of a conjunction between corporate identities. What are the trade-offs? What's good and bad? What should you do with it? And what I serve up is, at that given time where I was, it was very lucrative. It was great. Single, I was a workaholic. I would travel anywhere. I didn't have any responsibilities besides myself and my team. It was an awesome time. It was basically party years. But as you go on, when you have kids, or maybe you have a significant other or a partner, what does that new endeavor look like? If you were to have your own business again, is it the same type of trajectory? It isn't. And that's okay. It's just going to be a different kind of pasture. What is grass is greener? What does that mean? That means a specific thing at that given moment. If you were to ask me what my pastures would look like as a kid, it would be very linear. There wouldn't be a whole lot of visibility into other areas to catapult my career, because I just didn't have that information, and I didn't have that network, and the people around me and the community, yes, very supportive, but professionally just didn't have that upward mobility awareness that I needed as an individual. But if I were to answer that today, grass is greener. Now it's at a point where it's not greener for me. It's greener for kind of the kids, these younger humans, providing them with the foundation and maybe expediting them on ways to deal with frictions within society. So is this a good thing or a bad thing? Or even in education, it's just different parenting levels. Everything is on steroids. Right when you're in pre-K or your kids are in pre-K, you already have to think about the high school, the best high school, the college. Are you already investing in a college so they can go anywhere in the world? I digress, but it's just the fact that it's just a different beast depending on your responsibilities and perspective. And I think people should have a handle on that a lot more, rather than just having these check boxes on a linear spectrum. Because even if you're a cog and you kind of float through life, just very minuscule, you do what you do, you're content with what you're doing, that's okay. But the reality is, it's still going to be portrayed differently based on age, classification, responsibilities. If you get married, having a partner, kids.
Well, Ube, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on the
Mahalo.
show.
Thank you. Salamat po. Arigatou gozaimasu.
As a last ask, please review This Is How We Create on iTunes. Your review will go a long way to helping other people just like you find the podcast and to learn more about artists of color and how they lead a creative life.